Picture this: 10 million years ago, long before humans ever existed, deep inside a dense tropical forest, a ripe piece of fruit falls to the ground. Under the heat of the sun, it begins to ferment, its juice slowly turning into something strange: alcohol. One of our ancient ancestors, a small tree-climbing creature, catches that strange scent and follows it. Without knowing it, that creature becomes the very first member of our lineage to ever taste ethanol. And that raises the question that will drive this entire episode. Did we invent alcohol? Or has alcohol been chasing us for millions of years, long before we ever became human?
Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey across millions of years, make sure you're subscribed and have hit that notification bell, because what you're about to discover in the next few minutes might completely change the way you look at every drink you've ever had.
Let's start the story where it actually begins. Not with the first human who brewed beer, not with the first vineyard ever planted, but with a much older world. The tropical forests where the ancestors of modern primates lived millions of years ago. In those forests, ripe fruit was constantly falling to the ground, exposed to wild yeasts naturally present in the air and soil. Those yeasts feed on the sugar inside the fruit, and through fermentation, they convert it into ethyl alcohol. In other words, alcohol was never a human invention. It was already part of nature itself, present in every tropical forest for tens of millions of years. So did our ancestors know exactly what they were eating? Or was it simply an accident repeated thousands of times until it left a permanent mark on our evolution? About 10 million years ago, the primate ancestors we descend from relied almost entirely on fruit as their main food source. And here's the twist: overripe fruit, the kind that had already started fermenting, actually contained more available calories because fermentation breaks sugars down further. At the same time, its strong, distinctive smell, caused by rising ethanol, made it far easier to locate inside a dense, competitive forest. In other words, fermented fruit acted like a natural neon sign that said, "High-energy food, right here." The primates that developed a stronger sense of smell for that scent were simply better at finding food and surviving. And that, right there, is where this whole story begins. In the year 2000, biologist Robert Dudley proposed what later became known as the drunken monkey hypothesis. The core idea is simple. Our ancestors weren't searching for alcohol itself. They were searching for fruit, and alcohol was simply a byproduct of ripening and fermentation. But over time, through repeated exposure to small amounts of ethanol, our ancestors' bodies began adapting to it biologically. Even today, some animals in tropical forests, like certain civet species, have been observed eating fermented fruit containing alcohol concentrations comparable to a light alcoholic drink. So could those early, accidental moments of mild intoxication be the very thing that planted the seed of our complicated relationship with alcohol, one that's still with us today? Here's one of the most fascinating discoveries in this whole field. In a genetic study published in 2014, researchers identified a mutation in a gene called ADH4, responsible for producing an enzyme that helps break down alcohol in the body. That mutation appeared in the common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas roughly 10 million years ago, and it made the body's ability to metabolize ethanol about 40 times faster than in primates without it. In other words, our bodies didn't adapt to alcohol by pure chance. It was a real evolutionary mutation, one that helped our ground-dwelling ancestors, no longer living exclusively in the treetops, take advantage of fallen, fermented fruit without becoming completely intoxicated. The ancestors who carried this mutation had a genuine evolutionary edge over those who didn't. After millions of years of this accidental adaptation, modern humans arrived, equipped with a far more complex brain, capable of observation and experimentation. At some point during the Stone Age, an early human noticed that fruit, grain, or honey left sitting in a container for several days would transform on its own into a strong-smelling liquid with a strange effect. This wasn't a single lightning bolt discovery. It was the result of long, repeated observation, until humans realized they could deliberately recreate that process. That's the real turning point. The shift from a creature that received alcohol by accident from nature to a creature that made it on purpose. And that moment, as simple as it sounds, changed the relationship between humans and alcohol forever. So where was the first intentionally made alcoholic beverage in human history actually produced? The archaeological evidence points us to the village of Jiahu in China, where researchers found chemical residue inside pottery vessels dating back roughly 9,000 years. Chemical analysis of that residue revealed a unique mixture of rice, honey, and either wild grapes or hawthorn fruit, all ingredients rich in fermentable sugars. That tells us the people of Jiahu weren't making some simple accidental drink. They were producing a relatively complex blend, which suggests they were controlling the fermentation process with real, repeated intention. In other words, the oldest documented alcohol factory in history wasn't in the Middle East, as many people assume. It was in the heart of ancient China.
If you're enjoying this journey across thousands of years so far, take a second to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more history lovers just like you. Now, let's move on from China to the rest of the world, where the story of alcohol was about to change the course of civilization itself. At Rakafet Cave in the historic region of Palestine, archaeologists found evidence that the Natufians, one of the earliest semi-settled societies in history, were fermenting grain to produce a beer-like drink more than 13,000 years ago, thousands of years before organized agriculture even existed. That discovery overturned an old scientific assumption, which held that farming came before beer making, and raised a far more provocative possibility. What if the desire to produce alcohol regularly was actually one of the reasons humans domesticated wild grain in the first place? Later, in Mesopotamia, beer became a core part of daily life for the Sumerians, who even composed a full religious hymn honoring Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, describing in remarkable detail the exact steps of how to brew it, in what's considered one of the oldest written recipes in human history. While beer was being made from grain, a parallel story was unfolding with a different fruit entirely: the grape. In the Caucasus region, between modern-day Georgia and Armenia, humans began domesticating wild grapevines roughly 8,000 years ago, producing what became the earliest wine in history. At the Areni I cave in Armenia, researchers discovered the oldest known complete winery, dating back more than 6,000 years, complete with a wine press, fermentation vessels, and even a drinking cup. Clear evidence that winemaking was an organized, intentional process rather than a one-off experiment. From there, wine spread south toward ancient Persia and east toward Anatolia, eventually becoming a symbol of wealth and social status across many ancient civilizations. In the ancient world, alcohol was never just a drink. It was a bridge between humans and the sacred. In ancient Egypt, beer was offered to the gods as a ritual sacrifice, while in ancient Greece, wine became deeply tied to the worship of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and festivity, whose rites often involved collective altered states that his followers believed brought them closer to the divine. This connection between alcohol and the sacred wasn't a coincidence. The altered mental state caused by ethanol, from euphoria to a partial loss of control, must have felt, to ancient people, like a genuinely supernatural experience, closer to communicating with higher powers than to any simple rational explanation. In that sense, alcohol wasn't just an economic commodity in the ancient world. It was, above all, a spiritual tool. This might sound strange, but historical evidence suggests beer actually played a real role in building some of the greatest civilizations in the ancient world. In pharaonic Egypt, records show that pyramid workers received part of their daily wages in rations of beer,
which served as a safe source of both hydration and calories in an environment where clean drinking water wasn't always reliably available. In the Sumerian city of Uruk, one of the oldest cities in history, beer was a core part of the economy, distributed as wages, used in trade transactions, and it's even believed that the need to manage its large-scale production and distribution was one of the driving forces behind the development of some of humanity's earliest writing systems, used simply to keep track of accounts. In other words, alcohol may not have just been a product of civilization. It may have been one of the reasons civilization was built in the first place. But every story has another side. As much as alcohol gave ancient humans moments of celebration, spiritual connection, and real economic benefit, it also carried a much darker side. Ancient medical texts from Egypt and Mesopotamia explicitly warn against overconsumption, describing symptoms that are still easily recognizable today: loss of control, repeated dependence, and both physical and social decline. Even in societies that treated alcohol as something sacred, there were always strict social boundaries,
defining exactly when and by whom it could be consumed. This ancient tension between celebration and danger, between sanctity and addiction, wasn't some passing phenomenon. It was an early reflection of the exact same struggle human society is still living with today over this remarkably ancient substance. And this brings us to the question we started this whole journey with. Why does modern humanity, after all these thousands of years, still drink alcohol? Some scientists believe the answer lies in what's known as the evolutionary mismatch hypothesis. The idea that our bodies and brains still carry the exact same biological predisposition our ancestors developed millions of years ago to handle fermented fruit, while we now live in a radically different world, one flooded with highly concentrated alcohol that nature could never have offered our ancestors. In other words, the very same ancient drive that once helped our ancestors find food and survive has become, in today's world of easily accessible, highly concentrated alcoholic drinks, a genuine health and social challenge. A million-year-old evolutionary legacy, still alive inside every single one of us. From a single fermented fruit that fell to a forest floor millions of years ago, to a global industry worth billions of dollars today, humanity's relationship with alcohol was never a simple, straight line. It's been tangled up with our biological evolution, our earliest civilizations, our spiritual beliefs, and even our ongoing health struggles. But the real question still hangs in the air. Did humans ever really discover alcohol? Or was alcohol part of our evolutionary journey long before we ever became human at all? If you enjoyed today's journey across millions of years of history, make sure you're subscribed to support more documentaries like this one. And drop a comment telling us, in your opinion, was the discovery of alcohol a gift to human civilization or the beginning of one of its oldest struggles? See you in the next episode.